Hi everyone, I am here to talk about the Neo Geo 4-slot PCB, and it's probably one of my most favorite machines because of the fact that there's so many great games on the Neo Geo system. You can never get bored of it. They're a really affordable system and there's just a lot of variety on the games. And I don't really need to go into all of that, but I want to talk about the PCB because there are a lot of useful information out there, and I want to kind of put it all in one video. And here's my fully serviced 4-slot that came out of my version 3 Tallboy. So I've done everything to it. The first thing that you'll notice here is that the cage, the cover, has been painted. I stripped all the graphics, and I don't really need to look at all the labels or know which slot is which, and even the cartridge orientation has the arrows on the PCB and you can see them through here, so you don't really need any of the labels or anything. So I stripped all the labels off of it. I primered and painted mine with red enamel so that it looks pretty nice and matches the cab, of course, but the stock one's kind of like this in this galvanized steel cover. So I've been breaking down Nest Jess's board to pretty much service it. He told me about how his audio is relatively low, so I wanted to do the full battery of mods and updates to his board, or so that it's all ready to put back in this cab that he's restoring, and it's his birthday, so I want to take care of this for him. And this is my board. I've done everything to it, where I've cleaned it. I've done the Keystone battery mod, and I've done the service to the audio section, which is the full cap kit, and I'll go over that in a second. So the first thing you do is you break down the complete board set, and it does take a while. You have basically 5 screws for the top cage, and then you have the standoffs, and you have a bunch of also screws for the PCB, the connector section. So there's oftentimes 1 or 2 screws depending on which side that connect that keep tension or keep the connectors from one board to another down. And his board was completely dusty. It was out of a laundromat, and it had like a 1/16 inch layer of dust and lint over all the boards facing up. And first thing I did was I went in and washed the boards. I broke it down and I took the cover off of it. I haven't done anything with the cover. That's up to him. But from Raymond, RJ, or Channel Maniac from the Claw forums, he gave me some good tips back in the day, and he told me that the way you clean these boards is you use really hot water out of your sink, and you just completely submerge the board. And you get a toothbrush right in each of these cartridge slots, and you basically put dishwashing liquid all over the board or into the slots, and with the toothbrush you just go in and just clean everything out. And cleaning the surface of the PCB isn't as much as a matter, isn't as important as cleaning these cartridge slots with the oil and grime and corrosion or even oxidation on these pins for the cartridge. What you basically do is you get your toothbrush as deep in there as you can, and you create some sort of like a polishing action with your toothbrush, and you just kind of clean them all out, and you get it really deep. And I have an air compressor, so after I soaked and washed this and kind of got that polishing action, if you look down in there, all the connectors look all shiny now, and everything in the board's beautiful. But I used compressed air to blow out all the water so I don't get any minerals or anything kind of a coating on there as well, and get it nice and clean. So I did both boards. I had started to desolder a bunch of caps from his audio section here before I actually washed it, because I wanted, sometimes when I wash a board before I remove the caps, what happens is my toothbrush can't get really deep in there, so I get it kind of still got some dirt, and you can see areas that weren't cleaned as well. So I started decapping it before I washed this bottom board, and so this is the board on the bottom with the JAMA harness connector, with the modified JAMA connector for Neo Geo, well, the edge connectors here. So this is the audio section, the edge connector. These are the connectors for the cabinet, and the battery was here. And so the first thing I did after I washed it and was decapping some of the caps off the audio section was I removed the battery, and this is a nickel metal NiCad. It's actually a NiCad battery, and there's different types of batteries, and this particular board had this flat cylindrical battery, and these go bad over time, and I removed it because it really isn't of much use to a home machine to have a battery that recharges on there. So it recharges when it's on, and then it holds the settings for when it's off. And if you don't use your machine for like a couple months, you can lose your settings if this battery wasn't charged enough to hold enough charge. The rechargeable battery wasn't holding charge, and a lot of them have gone bad. Some people, if you use your machines a lot, I would suggest you go back with the original and put a rechargeable battery in there. But one mod that a lot of guys on the Neo Geo forums have done is called a Keystone mod, and what you do is I never knew why it was called Keystone, but after buying a few of these cell type CR2032 battery holders, I noticed that it said Keystone Electronics on there, so I figured that's why it's called Keystone. So I clipped one leg off of the battery, and then I heated it from the other side, and I pulled out the battery from the top, and I removed the battery that way, and then I desoldered the last post. And I had a hard time getting the silicon out. It's really on there, and I didn't want to damage the board by digging it, so I just left whatever I could on there. And so as I soldered on my Keystone battery holder, I had to make adjustments because the height of the silicon is obstructing this from seating properly. Also, you'll notice, depending on what type of battery holder you have, it may not fit flush against this particular location. So depending on which PCB you're doing for Neo Geo, you'll have different locations, and it's obstructed with this connector here. So I dremeled and I cut that little piece, maybe like a 1/16 of an inch, and I flattened it out and I filed it off to smooth so that it fit in there. And I've done a couple of these, and this is what I did to my board over there, where I had to shave the holder a little bit to fit. And some holders have a little thin ridge, and some have a thick ridge like this one. So it really depends on what you can find. And so I shaved it. I made it fit from this side, and then I noticed that the holes were too small for me to fit these posts down into the PCB. So rather than sizing this down and cutting that out, what I did, I just chopped them off, and I used a capacitor leg, and I soldered it on the side, and it's much more flexible, and I can bend it and stuff like that. And the other thing I noticed was that the width of the two posts on the PCB for the battery, the hole throughs are wider than the posts, the distance between the two posts on this connector. So I actually used the cap legs, and they're bendable, so I adjusted it and I fit it in there, and then that's how I got in there. I got it in there, and it's seating kind of funny, and I'm going to hot glue it so it sits more flush, or is more solid for when you stick a battery in there because of the silicone and whatnot. Also, there's this 470 ohm resistor that needs to be cut out of the circuit. You can just clip that one off and desolder the remaining pieces. That's part of the mod, because that resistor is for the rechargeable battery, so you can cut that right out. That's typical of the information for that mod, and so that takes care of that. And I don't use my machine all the time. I don't think Jess is going to use it all the time, so going with the battery is good, because you can leave there, you can come back a year later and that battery will hold charge. And some people think that it might last only 6 months, but I've seen a couple of years off of a good battery, and so that's what I suggest. And next I'm going to go over the cap section of this. So the cap section of the PCB is it's a little bit tricky at times to work on, mostly because depending on your PCB, you'll find that some of the legs on the cap were actually bent out, and so whoever put them in, they bent them out so that they hold, so that they can go through and solder them. And what that does is it once they're cut short and they're filled with solder, it's really hard to straighten them and pull the cap straight out. So that becomes tricky, and if you just try to wiggle them back and forth and you have two posts to deal with, you may find that you may just pull the through hole right out of the PCB, and then you got to do a repair on the trace and whatnot, and so that gets really tricky. Another part that's really gets difficult is the fact that when they put these caps in, they use 85 degree Celsius caps, and those are just typically low temperature caps. And the replacement kit that Arcade Components, RJ Channel Maniac, he offers, and what everybody says, is to use high temperature caps for this, because this section builds up heat and they're just rated much higher, so they last longer. And everybody's finding that their caps on these not so old boards are already going out, and probably because of the temperature in the section from the audio amp and whatnot. So I build my cap kits myself. There's a local place that I can pull caps and get whatever I need. Raymond has really nice high temperature caps that will fit in there. The ones that I found, they don't fit so well in this cram section around here, and I have small caps for all the rest of it, but in this section right here it gets really cramped. And so there are two 100U caps, was a microfarad, picofarad caps, and I have to bend the leads so that they're offset, so I can make room for this 22 microfarad cap. So so that's how I get it to fit in there, because I'm using larger diameter caps that don't fit in there so well. So that's one tricky thing. Another thing that I found on the back side is, how do you desolder these things without ripping out that trace? And once the legs are all straightened out, and you can pull it straight out, what I do is I tin both edges, both leads of the cap, and so that there's extra solder on there, and then I touch both of them with my soldering iron, and then I pull it straight out, and usually I get good results on that. And this board, the legs were a lot straighter than other boards that I've done before, so I'm having good results, and it's coming along nicely. Last night I did almost every cap. I think I left about 16 caps. All the 4.7 the microfarad caps, because I ran out of those, and so I've been I pulled them. I like this place local to me, because this cap is a short lead, with short leads. I got it for 2 cents a cap, and that's really cheap. And so and these are overrated. The original is 4.7 at what's like 16 or something like that, and this is 4.7 at 50 volts with 105 degrees. So that's a high temperature cap, and it's overrated on both accounts. So the rating that matches the 4.7, you can get a higher voltage, and that's an overrated cap, and so it'll last a lot longer. And so that's how I do this section. You go over and you do all the caps. Raymond has a really nice instruction sheet on his cap kits, and he tells you which ones are the filter caps. These 470s here, there's a bunch of them, and there might be one over here that it doesn't need to be changed because it's a filter cap for the power section. It's not actually for the audio section, and so that doesn't need to be changed. But I actually change it anyways. I like all my caps to match and for them to look good, so I just go ahead and change them, because I find my caps really cheap, and it's just right there, so I just do it anyway. So I just shotgun and do everything, and I just have a few more rows to do to finish up this one, and then I'll be done. I recommend you get your cap kits from him, because they're cheap. It's less than $10. He has all the information out there. I pull mine myself, so that's the way I like to do it, and it's really easy for me to pull together the parts to do these. Be careful, take a lot of time. I've put over 2 hours into these two boards already, and I'm still not done, from all the washing and going over everything, taking my time so I don't pull the through holes through the PCB, and just do it all right here. And then once I'm done, I'll finish it up, put it together with a few screws, and I'll be testing it in my 4-slot to make sure the audio levels are nice and high. And hopefully I'll be able to get this back to Jess soon for his belated birthday present, and everything will be nice. And I'll probably continue to shoot video once I'm finished with all this and can test out everything. And so off to the next section. Hi everybody, I've worked on the board more. As you can see, I have changed all the caps and I finished all that, and I really like this board because everything came out smoothly. After I've done all the caps, what I'd like to do is go back and double check everything. What's very well laid out on this board is the fact that you can see the orientations all aligned. So all the negative caps will either face this way or this way. So all the lines that show lines on the wraps on the caps, you can see that they're all pointed up or this way. So that's the line that marks the negative. I've also reinforced my my keystone holder. I put in a 2032 battery for the 5 volt. And I'm actually ready. I've inspected this board, double checked it for any wet spots. It's been 24 hours since I washed it, so it's all good. And I've also glued down any of the loose backing. I don't know, I think this is to prevent it from getting grounded out and on the board. So they put this backing on certain spots. That's my dog walking by, and the only thing else to do on this is the BIOS. And if anyone wants to update, put a upgraded firmware on the BIOS on there, that's what you would do. You'd burn a chip and you'd swap that out. So I'm gonna put this board together. And one thing that you'll notice when you're putting together your boards is where the screws go. So the standoffs go on all the corners and on the back here, so you can tell where the stock bolts were. So there's these little screws, little bolts with a little plastic washer. And so if there was a standoff in one corner here, then there won't be a bolt here. There will be a bolt here. If it's not directly next to the standoff, then it'll have one in both. So this one will get both. This one will get one here, and this one will get one here. So there's really only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these bolts. And then this board had its feet in this spot and this spot. So I'm going to move the middle 2 feet on the bottom. Those standoffs, I'm going to put them directly in the middle of the board. So there was a foot here, so I think they did these two, so I'm going to do these two, and then there's the foot here, so that they're kind of evenly spaced amongst the board. But the stock locations are here, these two. And then that's the rest of putting it back together. And then I can test it.